If you've ever heard Proverbs 31 used like a scoreboard to judge women, yeah, we're not doing that today. Today, we're reading it like grown-ups, with context, purpose, and wisdom that actually helps real life. Welcome to the Women in the Book of Proverbs. Proverbs.
Let me start with a question that sounds simple, but will absolutely expose us. When you hear Proverbs 31 woman, do you hear wisdom or do you hear pressure? Because some folks read Proverbs 31 like it's a divine job description. Must wake up at 4 a.m., purchase real estate, sew a wardrobe, run a small business, raise perfect kids, and still look like you didn't break a sweat. Listen, if that's the standard, we're all in trouble. Men too, especially men. Today we're going to read Proverbs 31 the right way. But as a portrait of wisdom rather than a guilt trip on women. The portrait will include dignity and godly character. We'll start with the theme of Proverbs. In this session, I'm going to give you a general summary of the book of Proverbs, the author and purpose, the themes and the setting, the character, and the types of Proverbs used to teach wisdom. And then we'll zoom in on Proverbs 31st chapter, verses 10 through 31, the virtuous woman, the wife of noble character. In part two of our session today, we'll look at the blacks in the Bible. Regarding the blacks in the book of Proverbs, we're going to explore the Egyptian influence on Israel's wisdom tradition, especially the connection scholars note between Proverbs and the teaching of the young Egyptian man, Amnathra. But today, let's just start with that woman. Looking in verses 10 through 31, we'll see what Proverbs is and what it isn't. Here's why Proverbs is tricky. To summarize, it's not a storybook. There's no single plot line as you would find in Genesis or even in Exodus. What you do find in Proverbs is a tapestry, a treasury, a quilt pattern of wise sayings. You do find in that the short sayings and the punchy lessons and the wisdom for real life. Not a complication, but practical everyday living. Guess what? Wisdom is the star of this particular show. This is a book built around daily decisions: how to talk, how to work, how to handle money, how to treat people, how to respond to correction, how to keep your heart clear in a world that profits from confusion. Proverbs teaches us that knowledge is collecting facts, but wisdom is setting people, events, and situations the way God sees them. That's the difference between being one who is interested in gaining knowledge and understanding, thus you're gaining wisdom. So there is a difference between being knowledgeable and being wise. In other words, there is a difference between being informed and being transformed. Now, regarding the author and the purpose of the work, as we said earlier, it does not have that kind of. I have a cat over my head, but we will continue. It does not have that kind of character building experience. This will be a spiritual response to Proverbs. So it teaches us that the author of Proverbs is principally and usually given to Solomon. His name shows up early and often in the scripture, and he collected and arranged wisdom saying. For those of you who were with me in Cycle 1, we talked about the 1,000+ sayings that Solomon is credited with. These proverbs have often been dated around 900 BC, during the high point of Israel's national life, their spirituality, their political aspirations, and the economic status of that particular nation. And the purpose of it is not trying to make you sound smart, it's trying to make you live smart. It's concerned with personal conduct, relationship, work ethics, discipline, integrity, speech, wealth, clarity, real work, everyday holiness. In other words, how can I live better and live in a holy life? And now, before we dive deeper into it, we want to take a look at the message around the pity sayings that we're going to find in Proverbs 31, or the wise sayings that we'll find in Matthew 31. Family, let's talk like we're sitting around the kitchen table or outside on the patio. If you're getting value from the biblical files of Dr. Mack, do me a favor, hit the like button, subscribe, and turn on the notification, because it tells the platform this content matters, and it helps us reach people who are hungry for biblical content that actually responds and is useful. Now, I also want you to know this. We will be having upcoming events and live sessions, as in question and answer sessions. We have themed studies and deeper dives into the verse by verse analysis of various topics. And I will answer your questions in real time. So, if you want to catch the next live stream, check the description and pin a comment below. I'll keep the schedule updated. As for instance, our next book will be the Book of Ecclesiastic. But listen, share this episode with one other person, at least one other person. Someone who loves Scripture but wants more context, more clarity, and less noise. All right, back to the Book of Proverbs. Proverbs returns to a big theme like a drumbeat. The fear of the Lord is a major one. It is not to say that you are terrified of it, but you are to see the fear of the Lord in terms of relevance, worship, and submission. Wisdom versus folly. There are two paths that we can follow, two paths that we can overcome. We have the third theme, the power of words. Speech can build a life or burn one down. Please, when you read it, take a look at the section that talks about the words that are spoken in anger and the result of that. And then talk about the ones that are quiet and cause you to think. Let's look at another theme, which is integrity. Who you are when nobody claps, who you are when no one is around. Another theme is hard work. Diligence is spiritual, not just practical. And Proverbs is deeply rooted in the cultural world of ancient Israel. Family based, community centered, grounded in the covenant life, meaning faith wasn't a private hobby, it shaped public behavior. Characters in Proverbs, what the book teaches us. Well, one of the smartest ways to read Proverbs is to notice its character types, almost like moral portraits. In fact, they are called caricatures, biblical caricatures. So you'll see the big three over and over again. The wise man embraces God's covenant and learns how to live by it. The fool resists God, rejects correction, and spreads damage. The simple minded, or just the simple, that's an undecided, easily influenced, drifting without directional person. The proverb expands these into related angles. We have those who are righteous and upright and diligent and prudent versus the wicked, the lazy, the scoffer, the wise in his own eyes type of person. And the last one, when you have that wise in his own eyes, that's not just a personality flaw, that's a spiritual flaw. Vocabulary matters, words matter. Let's grab a few key vocabulary terms that we find in Proverbs. Wisdom, over and over. Skillful living under God's covenant. Folly, not just willfulness, moral stupidity, spiritual blindsidedness. Oh, prudence is another one. Disciplined decision making. Reproof, that's correction meant to rescue the person of folly, that foolish person. Discipline, we have training and punishment. And then the word understanding, that insight that sits beneath the surface. So when Proverb praises wisdom, it's praising a life shaped by God, not a life shaped by vibes or trends or ego or influences on the internet. What do we say if we were doing a chapter overview of Proverbs? Well, it's famous because it describes the virtuous woman who is also called a wife of noble character. And it is unique because it comes with the teachings connected with King Lemuel, who's passing along wisdom taught to him by his mother. If we were to go back and take a look at the original context, there are those scholars who believe these Solomon wrote these as memories of teaching given to him by his mother Bathsheba. But that alone is worth pausing on. We have a mother shaping a king with wisdom, quietly, powerfully, and in a very gentle and generational manner. Then we get the poetic portrait, structured and intentional, describing a woman whose value isn't rooted in appearance, but in character and fear of the Lord. Fear of the Lord was the first of those major themes that we went over. And we got to say this very clearly that in Proverbs 31, it's not written to crush the woman, it's written to celebrate wisdom in a living, breathing manner. And I say woman here, but it also means men. It's wisdom with the sleeves rolled up. So, the three major characters that we had here, those that we say what you do, how you act, what others say about you. Well, let's get the first one characteristics of this virtuous woman. She is industrious and she's diligent. She works, she plans, she builds, she contributes. She's not chaos, she's order. Not because she's trying to prove something, but because wisdom produces fruit. Secondly, or a second characteristic, wisdom and prudence. Her speech is wise and kind, and that's rare. A lot of people can be quote unquote honest, but honesty without wisdom is just a loud weapon. She knows how to speak of life. Third characteristic, strength and valor. The Hebrew word behind virtuous comes from the sense of strength, one who has valor, one who has moral stamina. This is not a weak woman. This is not a silent woman. This is a woman with substance. And here's the part folks like to talk about. They enjoy talking about this one, but they miss it. This portrait isn't for the woman to admire, it's for everyone to pursue. As we said earlier, men and women. Because Proverbs 31 is showing you what wisdom looks like when it is alive. An analysis of proverb through two different lenses, and we do that a lot with the biblical studies. So there is a tension in the interpretation of proverbs because we have Matthew Henry who did it more on the secular plane, but we also have a very famous Berean study that refers to this woman, this virtuous woman, as the bride of Christ. Now, what we have to do here is to take a look at the fact that most readers see Proverbs as an earthly model of a godly woman serving her family and serving the community with excellence. However, some teachers also emphasize a deeper spiritual lens, um, reading the virtuous woman symbolically as the people of God, the faithful community of God, the bride imagery you see later in the scriptures. However, I look at it from both lenses, huh? The spiritual one being the one most accepted. You don't have to choose one and discard the other. Proverbs can teach character in daily life and point beyond itself to the spiritual realities of life. Wisdom literature often works like that, practical on the ground, but anchored in God's bigger story. What are the life lessons that we have here? Let's take a look. Let's land with the life lessons in Proverbs that we have to keep repeating. Embrace the fear of the Lord. Relevance that shapes decision making. Choose wisdom, not facts, but godly discernments. Watch your words. Your mouth can bless or break. Reject laziness. Diligence is spiritual. In other words, to work is good. Be open to correction. Um, Reproof is a rescue rope. Walk in humility. Pride binds, humility learns. Guard your heart because what gets in eventually comes out. Let's take a look at the legacy that we find here in the book of Proverbs when characterizing this woman in Proverbs 31. And that legacy shows us she was full of wisdom, she had diligence, and she had a godly character. She is a timeless model for women and men seeking to live by virtue. And Proverbs' recurring principle is clear. Those who choose wisdom and follow God find blessings, and those who reject Him choose shame and destruction. Now, as we transition into part two, Blacks in the Book of Proverbs, we want to talk a little about the broad understanding of the ancient world in terms of its culture, its exchange, Egypt's wisdom tradition found within Proverbs, in many cases paraphrased, and while the scholar or the collector, and by the way, interesting side note, although Solomon is credited with writing these, um, he did not finish them. So the scribes under Hezekiah, King Hezekiah, are credited with writing many of them. So what we have here is that the instruction of Amenthod is a parallel study. If you want this episode, you already know what to do. You need to subscribe and then turn on the notifications. And I am Dr. Mike, and it has been a pleasure to be with you in the webcast from the Biblical Files of Dr. Mike. Until
If this
next
helped you,
time, choose wisdom and live with it. For those of you who are interested, we will be looking at the book of Ecclesiastic. We will not be looking at wisdom as our primary character. We will be looking at the preacher. But when we get into Ecclesiastics, it's important that you remember the preacher lacked wisdom in many ways. It has been a pleasure, and may the Lord bless you.
if this helped you, like the video, subscribe, and share it with somebody who's ready for scripture with context, not slogans. What's one line from Proverbs that shaped your life or challenged you lately?